Hello to everybody. Thank you very much for participating at today the international event. And first of all, I would like to thank to Sakura, Chamit, and United Nations University for organizing this event and inviting me. Today presentation title is Green Commons, Tea, Gardens, and SDGs. Let's become the gardeners of our cities. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Juan Pastor Ibars. I am born in Spain and I moved to Japan 13 years ago. I have a PhD in architecture and I have been living in Japan for the last 13 years. 6 years I live in Kyoto and then I moved to Kanazawa, where currently I am a research associate of United Nations University Institute for the Advanced Study Sustainability Operating Unit Ishikawa, Kanazawa. This is the house where I am living, a traditional Japanese house. It has a garden that I am designing and also a tea house. So I will start by conserving tradition. So first of all, I would like to ask ourselves, what is a garden? And I like to quote what Professor Shinji Isoya has stated, that he says that first of all, how do we create a garden? My explanation starts with enclosing a space with something to limit in and then creating a unique world within it. And there are various ways to reproduce an ideal world, from symbolic to reproduction to realistic. So let's deepen in this concept. So about the influences of Japanese garden, first of all, of course, there is the Japanese landscape. As you know, Japan country is a forest country with mountains, deep valleys, and whitewater rivers. And when Japanese people are creating Japanese gardens, first of all, they are reproducing the landscape of their own country. Then, if we ask ourselves about the roots of the Japanese traditional garden, of course, there is first of all influence from the native philosophy or religion, the Shintoisms, that it is a kind of a unique way of animism, and it identifies the deities, the gods, at any phenomena of the nature. Then it also has influences from the Buddhist religion, and finally, from the Chinese traditional garden, where Japanese garden has many, is very much related to it. But with no doubt, one of the biggest characteristics of the Japanese traditional garden is the harmony that creates with the nature. As a conclusion, I will say that the evolution of Japanese traditional garden shows how it adapts to the ontology of each period. However, it was originated at a time where humans did not exert domination over nature, and that remains the essence of the concept. The roots of Japanese traditional gardens emerge from a holistic vision of the universe where humans see themselves as one more object of the natural creation. And because the traces of the Japanese traditional garden remain in the present as reminiscences of the original world view, Japanese traditional gardens are intermediary between the current humans, ancient indigenous people, and timeless nature. In this sense, time and space for any traditional Japanese garden remain unfinished. So let me briefly introduce about the spatial archetypes of the Japanese gardens. As I said, there are many links between the Japanese traditional space and sacred archetypes. First of all, about the sacred archetype of the Shinju no Mori, the sacred forest. In the traditional Japanese garden, I call that the veil, the space of the veil, the space created by the trees. And the purpose of this space is to create depth, which is called Oku, the innermost space. The second spatial archetype I call the clearing. And the sacred archetype, which is related, is the Shiki no Himorogi, the divine fence of pebbles. You might have seen in many temples and shrines this area covered by pebbles. And in Japanese gardens, it is constructed by the concept of Ma. Ma means space and time in between. And then this space is a space with no elements, trying to link elements between them. And this is the space of mainly for gathering the people, a space for socialization. And then the third spatial archetype is the the space of the flow, the water. And the sacred archetype that it comes is from the Kami Ikeshima, the divine pond and islands. And in the Japanese garden, we can see that the flow is usually running through the veil and the clearing. So I would like to have you in mind whenever you see a Japanese garden to try to identify these three spatial archetypes: the veil, an area covered by trees; the clearing, an area with no elements, a space for gathering; and the flow, the water running through these both spaces. And then this is very interesting, the relation between the tea and gardens. Somehow it starts in the 15th century, and they have been following parallel paths. So we no doubt right now the relation between tea and gardens are they cannot be separated, and they complement each other. And we can find the tea ceremony house in all the three spatial archetypes that I have explained you before. First of all, the traditional Japanese house was located in the spatial archetype of the veil within the woods. And that's the traditional atmosphere for the tea house, a dark atmosphere covered by trees. And then in the Meiji period, having a big influence, the Eastern influence, and mainly the English garden, and the way that the English people used to celebrate open air tea ceremonies and tea parties. It was translated also in traditional Japanese gardens by creating big spaces of law, open and wide. And then the tea ceremony was celebrated open air parties. And there was also a new welcoming new people and the whole society. And then we can also find big houses related to the spatial archetype of the flow with the water. So this is also because it's very important for tea and gardens, the purity of water. That's the biggest link between gardens and tea culture, the pure water. So next, let's move to the second part, which is transforming the present. So the point is how to utilize this traditional knowledge and to move to another stage of education for sustainable development. How to move from the old times spirituality to the current challenges, and how to give rise to nature, and to how to solve the current concerns of environmental crisis, etc. That I would like to explain. For that, I will introduce the case of Kanazawa. As you know, Kanazawa city is located in a very unique place. We have high mountains at the background, and there is an abundance of water resources. There is a main castle, the castle in the middle of the city, and there are two rivers. And between the two rivers, there is a water canal network of more than 55 water canals. These water canals are running through the city, and it irrigates also traditional Japanese gardens, what I'm going to explain. This is the traditional and the most famous garden in Kanazawa, as you know, Kenrokuen Garden. And I call Kanazawa Zoo Gardens because the water is widely incorporated in the city because the abundance of the water in the territories I said. So the pure water coming from the thaw of the landscape has led to the unique races of gardens. Kenrokuen is one of the famous gardens, but beside that, we have two types of gardens depending of the water system. One we can call the canal water garden, a garden which is irrigated by an adjacent water canal. And this is one example, the garden of Senda family. So this is the Onoso water canal, and the water goes inside the garden. It creates like waterfalls, a small pond, and a small river, and then it abandons again the garden. So this is a shared water. It's a water that is shared by the different gardens that are located in this place. But also we have the another typology. It is the spring water garden, a natural spring water that it's irrigating the garden. This is the garden of, one example is the garden of Shingensha Temple Garden. So here the concept is different. There is a natural spring water, and it is like a basin. So when the water is goes over, then it abandons the garden. So what is very unique in Kanazawa is the link between culture and nature. This is the, as I said, the water systems in Kanazawa with the Hakusan mountain, and then we have different platforms and different mountains, and the two rivers, the water canal, and natural water springs. So the point is that there are a group of gardens irrigated by water canals, but these gardens, usually the owners has a strong link with the culture. So for example, we have the Kaga dyeing, this person, Hiraki-san, he's dyeing textiles in his garden and adjacent water canal. And we can find also the small fishes or the lacquerware artisan, and we can find fireflies. Same as well with traditional tea ceremonies unique in Kanazawa, and in the background we can find different live beings that I will introduce you later. So, but these gardens, they change through whole the year with the four seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And there are many events mainly related to the tea culture that are celebrated all around the year. We need to synchronize this culture, nature, and the maintenance of these gardens. And this is one of the starting point of the project that I'm going to explain, the Sustainable Urban Nature Project, the SUN project, which is located in Kanazawa, United Nations University project. And the rationale of this project is to restore the harmony between the citizens and surrounding nature and find a sustainable model to maintain the green commons. It is aligned to the CBD IT targets that lays out steps to ensure that all cities are green, and also the 2030 agenda SDGs, mainly 11 goals to aim safeguard cultural and natural heritage, as well as UNU new urban agenda that states to increase the quality of public green spaces and urban gardens to regenerate urban biodiversity and strengthen climate action. So let me explain you about the background of this project and the objective. As you know, Japan currently is facing a depopulation, very extreme depopulation, and the result is the increase of abandoned plots and empty houses, as well as the lack of maintenance of urban green spaces. So we have an abandoned gray and green infrastructure, and this is the trend I would like to explain, because from 50 years ago, the nature has been constantly decreasing and decreasing, while the city has been expanding by colonizing surrounding nature. But from 2010, it happened that the population started decreasing. And then, but the nature continued decreasing. But what is happening right now, that we have an abandoned gray infrastructure that it could be transformed to new green infrastructure. But if it happens, there is a lack of manpower who is going to maintain this new green infrastructure. Then we thought about this motto that let's be the gardeners of our cities, because if all of us we get many benefits from these private and public urban green spaces, we also should be responsible to maintain these urban green spaces. That's why we call green commons. As I said, there is a degraded system, and we propose to restore this socio-ecological system by utilizing the benefits of a new green infrastructure, which is maintained at multi-level stakeholders governance, by transforming the gray infrastructure into nature-based solutions. So these are the steps of the SAM project, first of all, assessing urban nature fragmentation and gray infrastructure abandonment. Then the second is finding scientific evidence of nature benefits, environmental, social, and economic benefits. For example, production of biological diversity. This I will explain later. And third of all, implementing participatory action research. Integrate all the stakeholders with engaging all of them and finding a first transformative change that should be the catalyzing the future and the sustaining of future urban green spaces. So this is what we have found until now. This is we have been evaluating, for example, the biological diversity of these traditional urban green spaces. We have found that there are many small and very valuable live beings like tritons and also these door snails that they don't live anymore in the forest, but still they live in these gardens because there has been a strong link between cultural preservation and nature conservation. And this is very unique in the city of Canasaba because these gardens are connected to green corridors or water systems like the water canals. The second thing I would like to introduce you is the carbon sequestration. So we are evaluating how these gardens can contribute to mitigate climate change by sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. And we are running this project together with our research assistant, Alebel San. Then another point I would like to introduce you is the well-being. We have been quantifying the well-being that we obtain from the contact, the interaction of the participants with these gardens. We surveyed the participants before and after the interaction, and we found that the contact with these gardens increased the positive effect and decreased the negative effect, mainly because people feel more inspired, determined, and proud. And then I will also like to introduce about the kinship with nature. We organize different eco tours in these gardens, and we ask to the participants among the system services that we obtain from these urban ecosystem services, and they reply mostly that they could find a strong affinity with the nature. That's what I said, that these gardens can help to restore the kinship between humans and nature, and this is very important. So until now, I have explained, first of all, conserving tradition. Secondly, how to transform and how to utilize this tradition to restore current degradation of our cities by utilizing the benefits that we obtain from these gardens. And the point is to sustain the future, to prepare to sustain the future. And that's why we call that these gardens, and we are creating a new green commons. As I explained before, if we are get benefits from these gardens, and we should be also responsible of the conservation of these gardens. So these are the new green commons. And we found that first of all, we need to restore the kinship between humans to obtain harmony. And once we restore the harmony between humans, we are able to establish a relation of kinship with nature. And then what we obtain is well-being. This is one very fundamental step. And secondly, we should integrate all the stakeholders. I mean, the public administration, the experts, the owners, and the citizens. Each of us, we have different responsibilities and rights. And the final point is to establish a strong system linking nature conservation and cultural preservation. And this is what we are learning from the tradition of Japanese gardens and tea, and the new approach of SDGs, and implementing the different goals I have been introducing, and the contribution of these activities with each of the SDGs that you are seeing in the screen. So this is the end of the presentation, where I try to explain how to become the gardeners of our cities by having a new approach to traditional tea culture, traditional tea gardens, and implementing SDGs.